I'm Craig Duxbury, Chief Client Officer at Stein IS. Welcome to everybody here in attendance today and to everybody from around the world who's joining us virtually. I'd like to start by thanking everybody for being here, especially our speakers for giving up 2 hours of their energy, their professional energy, at a time when for many of us as a B2B community, we are facing the challenges with the crisis which is taking place in Ukraine, which we face either personally or professionally. So just on behalf of us, thank you very much for your attendance today, and we hope for a speedy and peaceful solution to the crisis. B2B Lions launches for the first time in 2022, which gives us as B2B marketing a fantastic opportunity to actually now review where we are and what you're going to find out today in terms of the effectiveness ladder and where we sit as B2B marketers, but also what it's going to take to reach some lofty height expectations of our CEO when it comes to becoming as B2B marketers growth drivers within our respective organisations. Now, I would never ever advocate climbing a ladder in windy conditions, okay, but there is definitely a positive wind blowing in a great direction for us as B2B marketers, especially with the launch of the B2B Lions. Delivering and proving that effectiveness is a big challenge which we face as marketers, especially when we get to things like budgeting cycles and proving return on investment. It's really difficult. So what you're going to actually see today is get some insights from some amazing panel speakers to help you with that in the future. What can't be argued is, as B2B marketers, how resilient we've been, especially in the last few years, and how indispensable we've really been to our organisations, and the fact that as a community we strive for greater improvements in terms of sophistication levels and up in our skill sets, which is fantastic. I think in the public domain there's been lots of talk from a B2B growth driver perspective when you look at things like data, segmentation, when you look at CX, when you look at content, when you look at sales tech, MarTech, ad tech, buyer journeys. A lot has been discussed, but I think that area of B2B creativity has been lacking to date. And I think now is the real opportunity to put B2B creativity at the centre, and for us as agencies to work closer with our clients to help turn B2B creativity into that much needed strategic asset. You know, the race is on for us as a B2B community to up the ante in creativity. I think you're going to see today some insights which show that the standards of some of those B2B advertising campaigns out there aren't really delivering that real impact. That provides an opportunity to us all within our individual sectors to get there first ahead of the competition and to turn B2B creativity into a differentiator for our brands and for our business. The B2B Institute at LinkedIn, in association and partnership with Walk and the Lions, recently published the B2B Effectiveness Code, which looked into the types of effectiveness as it relates to the advertising, but also the types of creativity that helps to drive those effects within it. And now with the B2B Lions launching for the first time in 2022 at the festival, you know, this really is a poignant moment and a catalytic moment and an exciting one for us all as B2B marketers to actually really put B2B creativity where it should be, right at the top of the game. So it really is on vogue. The time is now kind of for that, and it's amazing today that we have an amazing panel of speakers who I'm now going to introduce to. We've got Simon Cook, the CEO of Lions, who's going to headline speak, and I'm going to introduce him in a minute. And then we've got Mimi Turner, B2B Institute at LinkedIn, who heads up EMEA and LATAM. And we've got Dave Tiltman, VP of Content at Walk, so fantastic introductions there. And then we've got 3 amazing marketers. We've got Isla McKenzie, CMO at UBS, Sarah Higgins, the MD at Spider at State Street Global Advisors, And we've got Simon Edward as well, the CMO at IBM for UK and Ireland. So please, let's get all your energy in for everybody who's there also virtually. Please fire any questions through. There'll be some times to do some Q&A after each session. But for now, I'd like to do the initial introduction to Simon Cook, our headline speaker. So if you could please give me a warm welcome. Simon, welcome.
Thank you very much, Craig, and it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. Thank you very much for the warm welcome, and hello to everyone who's watching digitally from home as well. As Craig said, this year at Cannes Lions, I should say, 2022, we will be launching the inaugural B2B Lions, and very, very excited about that. I have to say it's been overwhelmingly positive reaction, and we look forward to seeing the body of work that emerges from this inaugural Lion. But over the next 20 minutes or so, I thought it would be interesting to delve into why we created this in the first place, why there was a need. We work very collaboratively with the global industry. We listen to them, and what they're telling us is that the time is now. And so what we're going to do is take a little trip down memory lane and look at some of the very impressive existing examples of B2B creativity, and also some of the main themes and trends which emerged from the 2021 festival last year. And there's no scientific approach to this. I'll tell you what we do. We scan through the hundreds of pieces of content which dominate our stages at the festival, and derived from the many, many conversations that are had across 29 different Lions, we're able to decipher the 3 most uttered words that take place during that week, usually in the south of France, and of course last year digitally. Let's take a look at what they were.
Were there any themes that you felt particularly came out in the work this year that maybe even surprised you?
The level of partnerships.
Partnership.
Partners.
Partners.
Partnership.
Partnerships.
Anxious partnerships. Partners.
Partners. Partnership.
Partners. So when we look at a partnership, we tend to look at it through 3 lenses.
You need a great partner.
Working pattern with your partners.
You need NGO partners, you need influencers.
If you don't trust the pilot, don't get in the plane. You know, and in this instance, it really does feel like a match made in heaven.
The interesting thing that we've focused on is simplicity.
Simpleness.
Simple.
Simple. Simplicity.
Super simple, smart idea.
The simplicity.
Simply just clicked on the site.
Simple. Super simple.
Very simple solution.
It's simple, authentic, and unique to your brand.
So simple and so obvious. It's a sucking eggs thing to say.
Yeah, funny.
Any last thoughts from you as the senior representatives of the advertising industry?
Work is needed to achieve equal representation in race and ethnicity.
Presentation.
Representing.
Represents.
Represented.
Representative.
It's representing
125 countries represented.
Representation.
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 Represent.
representation.
Representativeness.
To be more representative. And we got that from being more representative as a company ourselves.
That was really nice.
That was pretty cool.
You're doing it well. It's great.
There you go.
It's great.
Wait, I was about to get out of my seat and start dancing. I love that music right there. Hey!
Did you get that? Yeah, good. So it was partnerships, simplicity, and of course, representation. So let's kick off with partnerships. So Forrester's global research, and you may have seen it, shows that 76% of companies agree that partnerships are absolutely key to delivering revenue goals. And the study showed that more than half of companies, so to be precise, that's 52%, generate over 20% of revenue from existing partnerships. And that's also a trend that WARC have been tracking for some time now, the authority in effectiveness. So what is new about partnerships exactly? Because as we know, partnerships for profit, it's not a new concept. So what's the new angle? And as one jury member put it, who was judging the work from last year, to tackle the challenges in society, the logistical and behavioural change required by the masses, cannot be progressed by a single company alone. And we've seen some exciting changes in the nature of partnerships today. So one way we can track this change is through the awards themselves. So if we look back at the company credit list from 2011, so roughly 10 years ago, and compare that to the credited companies that we see on the winning work today, so from 2021, there's an exciting shift when it comes to partnerships and collaboration. So here you can see a chart which shows the percentage of shortlisted work where one or more company has been credited on a creative idea. And that spans across B2C and B2B, just so you're aware. So in 2011, only 4% of shortlisted work was the result of a strong partnership. And that now has dramatically risen to 15% of all shortlisted work, which is a big old jump. And it just shows that more and more that companies are using collaboration as a tool to really drive everly increasing effective work. And one of the most interesting trends with partnerships is that we're seeing the concept of the partnership actually being the creative idea itself. And in this theme, the uniqueness of that collaboration has really come to the fore. So let's take a look at our first example. In partnerships with LinkedIn, you may know this piece of work. It's for, what's it for? The Big Issue magazine, which is based in the UK. And obviously is designed to help homeless people and empower them to get off the streets. And during the pandemic, the vendors lost their market to office workers. So it's an interesting case, a great example of creativity. Let's take a look at the piece of work.
The Big Issue is a UK magazine sold on the streets by people in need to provide a positive alternative to begging. We try to elevate those less fortunate in the eyes of society.
Big Issue, folks.
But then everything changed. We went from selling 80,000 magazines a week to 0. We needed a big change in our business. We recreated the vendor sales model online, and we chose to do it on LinkedIn because that's where 70% of our vendors' former customers were. Cross-referencing workplace locations on LinkedIn, we found people who worked near where our vendors used to sell, and we recreated that neighbourhood digitally. So the vendors could reconnect with the same professionals who used to walk past them every day.
So there we go. The judges felt this was really effective and a clever choice of partnership, and it took home a whopping 6 Lions, including one of the Grand Prix at the festival. And as you can see from the results, there's a significant rise in total traffic, but also an increasingly whopping 325%, so nothing to be sniffed at there. And in her debrief to the jury, the actual president of that category, Tiffany Rolfe, who is from RGA, the CCO, mentioned that this choice of partnership was a distinctive element of the work's creativity. So not only did this partnership connect street vendors with professional customers whose support was, desperately lacking, let's face it, it also allowed homeless people to learn new skills and seek opportunities to work. So the other aspect of the partnership that we wanted to discuss was the longevity that drives success. And I can't stress this one enough. It won't be news to you that strong brand agency partnerships equate to brilliant creative work. And not only that, by our standards, Lion-winning work. So finding a partner that you can commit to over time, that's something we wanted to delve into. And from our own data, we're able to see multiple examples of really, really strong relationships that have gone on to win lots of Lions, that have really hinged on long-term collaboration. So year on year, these partnerships are winning Lions. They're coming up with creative and original ideas. And it's the trust between the two parties involved that really generates that trust, that confidence. And, there are a few examples here, but to call them out, Nike and Wyden and Kennedy have worked together for 28 years, can you believe it? BBDO and Mars, another one, another strong allegiance, and they've won, as a result of that, 47 Lions across 14 countries in the last 10 years. So we wanted to delve into that a bit further, and so we looked back a few years ago to a study that was presented on the main stage at Cannes between Razorfish and Contagious. And what they set out to prove was that agencies and partners, a 10-year relationship or more, had twice the average win rate in terms of taking home metal, so really impressive there. And it's very much our hope that the commitment to longer-term partnerships will drive longer-term commitment to creativity. So it drives the question, are you thinking about how you're investing in agency brand relationships to build trust and mutual respect, where ideas can really come to the fore and thrive? And it's not just about the short term, but for the long haul. So it's about through thick and thin. And you know, we've seen where agencies slip off when they hit bumps in the road. Now, one of the questions this generated in Cannes last year was, are we thinking laterally about the brand partnerships that we can create? So, and do we need to think about which innovative companies that may sit outside the norm that we may wish to collaborate with? So next up, you heard it there many times at the festival, it was all about simplicity. So why is simplicity so important now especially? Well, perhaps it's because we're living in a very noisy and a very complex world. Anything that can contribute to making our lives much, much easier and more convenient is going to have a positive payoff, right? So winners this year used simplicity to achieve cut-through, and many of the entries that were judged this year had stellar examples of how that translated into the bottom line itself. Because as we know, simplicity creates salience, and salience, of course, drives sales. And you'll notice that even the biggest and most complex organizations out there in the world are focusing on simplicity right now. So in her CMO in the Spotlight session, which took place last year, Deborah Wall, who's the Chief Marketing Officer of General Motors, explained exactly how a laser-sharp focus on solving just one problem can have an incredible impact. And the evidence of that is really, really strong. You only have to look at studies like this one from Millward Brown. And this comes from their link test database and demonstrates that communicating a single message works most effectively. So in the test, they showed that the chance of recall with just one message is 100%, which is of no surprise to any of us. For 2 messages, it's 65%. For more messages, you can see how that decreases over time, which brings us back to the old adage that if you throw one tennis ball, someone's likely to catch it. If you throw many, then they'll drop them all. So I think our first piece of advice in the search of simplicity goes back to basics, and this is something we saw across many examples of the winning work from the festival this year. All hail the return of the single universal insight. Thank God. Where's it been? So many pieces of work really honed in on a single powerful insight that resonates with the masses. And here is a piece of work that really exemplifies that in practice. And the brief here was to develop a safety proposition and a communications platform that can be executionally rolled out across global businesses. It needed to get cut through, but they'd failed to get everyone's attention in a number of attempts before. So what do? They stripped it back. Let's take a look.
When you're one of the world's biggest construction companies, safety means more than just reputation.
Been involved in projects where there's been fatalities. For something like that to happen on a site is tragic, and the site's never the same.
But sometimes the more noise you make, the less people listen.
The messaging and the way we communicate safety to the workers is very messy. It's very inconsistent, and we felt it was very, very ineffective.
So in January 2018, the task was set. Unify all safety communications with one creative idea that resonates with Lendlease's thousands of office and construction workers. Introducing the real-life mums of real-life Lendlease workers. From the moment you were born, she's kept you safe. No matter how old you are, when she talks, you still listen.
I want you home in one piece, you hear me? Even though safety is such a serious issue, you don't always actually have to approach it in such a serious manner, and you can have fun, and sometimes that actually makes it more relatable than if it was just being the same old lecture over and over again.
These mums help transform 2 pilot construction sites into an immersive Mums for Safety experience. And overnight, safety became a talking point. In terms of employee engagement, this has been the company's most successful campaign ever. It's been the top trending campaign on Pulse, Lend-Lease's global intranet, with the most ever comments and most ever likes. And the campaign assets have recorded the #1 download rate. It worked. 6 months after launch, the rate of critical incidents across Lend-Lease's Australian operations had declined by 27%, which was 9 times the decline of only 3% in the global business as a whole.
So that piece of work took home a silver in the PR Lions last year. And the idea had real impact because after launch, the rate of critical incidents, as you heard there, dropped by an impressive 27%. And by shifting safety messages from the voice of the brand itself to the workers' mums, it bypassed the corporate filter and went straight to the heart of that audience. And it's also worth noting that how a simple message can also allow for experimentation as well, because there was a clarity of message. They were able to experiment with humour as well, something that we probably all need right now. So Suzanne Powers, who was the president of that Lion, praised the work across the Lions that won this year that honed in on that singular insight, and also work that used humour to create a bit of laughter too, something that brands are tending or have steered away from in a purpose-dominated arena that we're working in right now. But we are starting to see a return of humour and irreverence and silliness returning to advertising and branded communications. Thank the Lord. But as you saw there, a little bit of humour can go a long way. So if we're thinking about what we can take away with this, I think the simple message is that you have to be ruthlessly stripped back, because the research really shows us that the simple message will stick with people for much, much longer, which begs the question, if we were all to really be honest with ourselves and strip it all back with our own organisations and our own brands, do we even know what our one single message really is? And secondly, what we did was dug real deep in order to uncover simple, singular insights and then think about how we can execute creatively on top of that. So it's worth thinking about, is there a product truth that you could have a lot of fun with rather than sticking with something which is just completely product focused? And more on that from the team later. Which brings us to our third and final theme. You heard it there a lot. It dominated the virtual stages of Lions in 2021. It was, of course, representation. And when we talk about representation, it's not just about reflecting the views of others, but marginalised groups. So representation, as we know, makes people feel seen and heard, and also builds brand affinity. So no matter the sector or the audience, creative work has the power to move culture forward, and we've seen that time and time again with the winning work from Lions. But continued underrepresentation or misrepresentation in ads is holding back more than just the brands itself, also wider society. So we've been partnering with an organisation for many years now called the Gina Davis Institute, and their work measures gender representation in media. So each year we give them access to the winning work, the Lions that we have, and you can see here a selection of stats, and there's too much here for me to go in any great detail, but 2 things to pull out here. People of colour are better represented in ads now, apparently, so it's 38%, and this has moved quite significantly from 2006, as you can see there. However, LGBTQ+ characters are virtually non-existent, so only 1.8% of characters are shown as explicitly LGBTQ+, compared to what we think is 10% of the global population. So clearly a lot of work to be done there. We need to do better about representation of groups, focusing, of course, not just on gender, but intersectional. But the good news is that amongst the Cannes Lions winners, the stories of marginalised groups came to the fore. We started to see it more and more in the winners. And a couple of great examples of the Grand Prix from VMLY&R for Starbucks, and also MasterCard. Huge organisations that decided to stand up for the rights of transgender people by helping them legally change their names. So I don't have time to show you these pieces, but if you would like to see them, come and see me after. Happy to point you in the right direction. On the topic of marginalised voices, Titanium Lions president from 2021, Susan Cradle, I think articulated it really well. She spoke about how conversations in the world are happening on the side, with small groups of people doing their best to highlight the problems that we should all be addressing as society. So now what we're seeing is brands amplifying those conversations more and more, and sideline discussions being pushed back to the fore. And on the theme of representation, there were two active traits that we really saw in the work. And the first one was around allyship. So take this example from Shutterstock from Buenos Aires. They wanted to show that their tool is effective for creative professionals from all backgrounds and businesses. The idea was that all stereotypes start with a search. So if you think about if you search in Google for boss, you're going to get a picture of a man. Love, heterosexual love. So to tackle this, Shutterstock made a permanent change to their business model by making their searches more representative in the world. And as a result, Shutterstock saw a 20% increase in image sales compared to the previous month. So the reason this stood out really for the jury was because they fundamentally changed the way they worked for a more inclusive business model. In this case, they made representation the primary focus, and it will have a longer-term resonance in the market because of that. So the other trend that came out from the representation was the positive representation of communities as heroes rather than victims. So as president of the health and wellness category in 2021 said, this is Tom Richards, it's about empowering people rather than make you feel sorry for them, something we see all too often in this type of advertising. And a great piece that really emulates this theme was the Grand Prix winner from Health and Wellness in 2021. So here, a social enterprise soap called Bico wanted to close the... Oh, let's see it first.
But only 4% consider disability.
Other employees could do the same as Bico.
And give them a chance.
To steal our staff.
Hi, you're nicking my line. Steal our staff.
That's why you'll find us and our CVs on Bico soap packs across the UK.
The three factory workers hold up soap bottles with their faces on.
You're a handsome man, Michael. Thank me. So what's a looker like me doing on your feed?
I'll make you famous, Bigozzi.
Just need that chance and it could change someone's life completely.
I hope more companies try and employ like Bico.
So as you can see there, a social enterprise soap, Bico wanted to close the disability employment gap by letting other brands steal their staff. So 80% of whom have disabilities. So of the results, the biggest win was that over 40 potential employers contacted Bico to inquire about making that steal. So that brings us to the end of that section. And just to finish off, really, look, overall, we are incredibly excited about the launch of the B2B Lions this year. That gave you a flavour of some of the great work that's already being produced, which backs up our rationale for actually introducing the Lion in the first place. So some of the themes there which emerged from 2021, the importance of partnerships, simplicity, which seems so straightforward and obvious, but very rarely done well, and also representation, which I'm sure we'll see come back again through the work this year. So with that in mind, here is our announcement. Hopefully people are already engaging with it. And as I said, the reaction has been overwhelmingly positive. So genuinely looking forward to seeing what the inaugural jury decide is the global standard later this year in June. Thank you very much.
Simon, thank you very much. I think it's great to see some new dynamics, and perhaps we can now move away from just B2B creativity versus B2C creativity is one rational, is one emotional, and we've got a few new dynamics at play, which I think is going to be amazing as we proceed. But there's going to be time now for some Q&A. We probably could do this for so long, but I'm going to open it to the floor initially within the live audience. So if anybody does have a question, if you'd like to put your hand up for Simon, and then we can take it from there. Craig, thank you very much. Yeah. Susanna, Craig's there.
Hi Simon, it was a very inspiring presentation.
Thank you.
It kind of is a lot of great work that was award-winning work that focused on corporate purpose and social impact, which likely should be. Are you seeing the pendulum swing toward more commercially focused work, or work that combines both business and social impact as its end goal?
That's a great question. It's an interesting shift that we've seen over the past couple of years. You know, if you think 3 to 5 years ago, we saw the introduction of purpose in the context that you're describing. And there was some criticism a couple of years ago from the jury that were judging the work that it was too heavy on purpose in that respect. But in 2021, the interesting shift that we saw was purpose for profit. So often we've seen brands who have attached themselves in a quite clumsy way to a cause that has no bearing on their brand whatsoever. What we're starting to see is increasingly clever integrations which drive the business, but also have a wider impact on social causes. So that'll be interesting to see how that continues to develop this year.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Is there one more? Sorry? Time for one more.
Hey Simon, that was amazing, and it was inspiring. As a B2B agency guy for as long as I've been a B2B agency guy, you know, I think that the influence of Lions will be very catalytic for the B2B space in general. But the question, I actually do have a question.
She's going to say thank you.
The question is around, you know, one of the tenets that you put up was simplicity. You know, and I look at some of my B2B peers around here, and we're not always known for simplicity as B2B brands and as B2B marketers. And you know, do you have any words of wisdom of how we in complex categories get to simplicity and can sell simplicity within our organizations? How's that for an easy question?
I'll echo what I mentioned during the presentation, which is if you can go through that painful, or maybe painful exercise of stripping everything back to actually look at what your one message needs to be, then that really does start to create room for you to play around creatively with other aspects, as we saw there in that brilliant example of the working mums. So, you know, if you're not sure what your one message is, find out really quickly. Find out it's the right one, and then there is room to play.
Thank you. We'll take one more before we need to move on. Again, we can catch up with Simon afterwards. We'll be around for a little while.
Hi, Simon. Is it on?
Yes.
I've seen Cannes change over the years in terms of how it focuses on creativity and is becoming more and more upstream. And frankly, B2B was unfashionable for a long time in our industry as a sector. But now, with the introduction of the much awaited and finally great B2B Lion, I mean, what tips can you give all these lovely people watching in terms of the line itself? I mean, is the purpose of the line at the highest level to help B2B marketers demonstrate creativity in the boardroom of B2B marketing?
I think you hit the nail on the head there. The best example I have is when we introduced a health and wellness line and a pharma line. You know, the industry came to us because they wanted to use the line as a tool to elevate the discipline, to create a benchmark. And you know, in the first year, we didn't see that many clients coming to the festival to support the health and wellness line or the pharma line. Now, I would say they're all there. And they're there because they know that they can use creativity as a lever in the boardroom, to your point. And we're already starting to see that effect now that health and wellness and pharma are coming into their 5th, 6th year. So exciting to see, and I hope this follows the same trajectory. I'm sure it will.
Wonderful. Right, Simon, thank you very much.
Thank you.
those seats available if anybody feels they're a little bit out on a limb over here. So now's the perfect moment if you're going to take it.
As we move on to our second session with Mimi Turner, David Tiltman, they're going to ask you a really, really difficult question as B2B marketers as to whether or not your advertising has got product delusion in it. Ouch, that's going to hurt a few of us, but they're also going to give you some signs and a path for taking that creativity on to become more of a strategic asset. So if you can join me in giving another warm welcome, please, Mimi and David, welcome.
Hello everybody, I'm Mimi Turner and this exceptionally tall chap here is David Tiltman.
Afternoon.
And hello James. And actually it's a really warm day and those look like very comfy seats. So if you take away one thing from today, it's that we are the Jay-Z and Beyonce of creative commitment, because in B2B creativity, creativity is about commitment and you have to put a ring on it. So if you're planning to just doze for the next 20 minutes, that's the one bit that you need to remember. The bit I need to remember is how this works. That's exactly it, yeah. So as I said, I'm Mimi Turner. I'm with the B2B Institute at LinkedIn. And for those of you who might not know us, we're a think tank. So we sit within LinkedIn and we work with practitioners and marketing researchers and thinkers in the advertising space. And so we worked with Ehrenberg Bass, we worked with Roy Sutherland, we worked with Roger Martin. We did a lot of work with Walk that we're going to talk you through today. And broadly, our point of view on the world from the research that we do is that B2B brand advertising is the biggest growth lever for B2B businesses. This is the lever on which we think that this industry should pull. So you've seen some of the work that we've published, which is How Brands Grow, the Objectivity Trap, which is about creative effectiveness, and work that we've done with System 1 and Orlando Wood to look at really what works and how we can optimize for effectiveness. And I think to really understand that the world is not necessarily shaped the way that we think it is, and to understand how decisions and buying decisions in B2B are really made. Now, our kind of observation in the world is that in B2B, there's a lot of what I would call the product delusion, which is a sort of a love letter to products and features and capabilities, which in themselves are important, but they're actually just not what makes a brand memorable. You know, when I switch to the next slide, you're not really going to be able to tell me the difference between optical CRM and CRM software development services. Excellent vendors, so I'm certain that they both are. When we try to think about advertising, I mean, it was really interesting to see some of the really powerful examples that Simon showed, which demonstrate that how powerful things can be when you take yourself out of that mindset. But in B2B, still overwhelmingly, when I look across my feed in LinkedIn, the product delusion is almost everywhere. Now, we've obviously mocked up the slide on the left, but if B2B Coke was in my feed, I think it would tell me that it was brown, sweet and fizzy. I think it would tell me that it was 30% browner than my nearest competitor. But obviously, real Coke ads are not like that. The ad on the left is really about, now and harvesting a kind of, the idea that if I tick these boxes right now, I'm going to buy. And the ad on the right, which is obviously how Coke advertise, is much more about priming. It's much more about understanding that what you need to do is to create a scenario by which you come to mind, you are remembered in a future buying situation. So we think that there are certain things that are very different in B2B. The buyer decision, the buyer journey is different. The buying group dynamics in B2B are very different. But in fact, the way that you come to mind, which is really what advertising creative is about, is not that different. Now, you can say to me, or David could say to me, although he's not saying it right now, but he can say to me that, you know, I get polar bears and I get Coke ads, but I just don't really have very strong emotional relationship with my CRM system. I just want it to work. And I would say, you know, that's a really interesting perspective, and of course that's how we think about things. But really, it's not very true. You know, in fact, professional decisions and buying decisions are fraught with social and emotional considerations. And we're sort of in love with the functional and educational, what are the specs and features, what is the product list, because we feel that's where safety is. And I think that this kind of logical framing is like a consensual hallucination. 95% of us spend 95% of our time in that space because we think that's where 95% of everybody else actually is, right? But I think, well, we think, that there's a kind of below the iceberg level of educational, but mostly social and emotional considerations, which are really to do with the one thing that socially and emotionally we care about, which is status. And those are much more important questions that we do not address. So how do I sell this to my team? Like, if I buy the system and it doesn't work, it's on me. Like, I'm going to look really bad. Will I get blamed if this goes wrong? These are really the drivers. The ad that Simon showed, which I actually hadn't seen before, how will it affect my mum if I get hurt? That's a social and emotional consideration, and it formed a Grand Prix winning campaign. So our view on the world is that if we understand this within the context of advertising and understand that being remembered is actually more important than having 15 product specs, then we'll be onto a much sort of stronger framework for creative resilience, which is something that I think B2B has a tremendous opportunity to embrace, because, you know, just as brown sweet drinks are generic and white powdery soapy things are generic and blue viscous conditioning things are generic, many B2B products are also generic. Let's look at the most generic products in the world and how they actually communicated their capabilities and learn something from them. So that sort of backs up some of the work that we did, and David can talk, we'll talk you through, but David can talk you through how Walk came to partner with us on the next piece of work around how we actually measure effectiveness and commitment.
Thank you, Mimi. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the research we've done with the B2B Institute, but to give you a bit of background to that, in 2020 we did some research in the B2C space called a report called the Effectiveness Code, which we did with a researcher called James Herman. And as part of that analysis, we looked at thousands of B2C campaigns from all over the world. And we looked at the data behind those campaigns. We generate a lot of data at Walk in terms of the tagging that we put behind campaigns and what that tells us about campaigns. When we looked at a very large batch of effectiveness campaigns, we noticed a few things. We noticed that 3 factors really seem to correlate with higher levels of effectiveness. Those 3 factors were the budget behind the campaign. It is still a truism that the more you spend, the more likely you are to generate higher levels of effectiveness. But budget isn't the only thing, thankfully. There are 2 others that are interesting. The first of those 2 is the number of channels you run in. Now, those of you who know your effectiveness research will know that reach is a really important driver of effectiveness, one of the most important aspects of media planning. So more channels tends to mean more reach. And then finally, it's about duration in market. It's about time you actually have a message in the market. The longer a message is in the market, the more time it has to generate things like recognition, or become a sort of distinctive asset, if you know the lingo. And these 3 things seem to combine. And we generated this principle called creative commitment, which is, it's all very well and good having a great piece of creative, but you need to back it with something. So budget, channels, and duration. That became creative commitment. Now what we wanted to do, working with the B2B Institute, is to test whether that principle held within B2B. So what we did was we created a much narrower set of campaigns, all of them from the Walk database, all of them focusing on B2B. So it's 435 case studies since 2010. We hired the same researcher, we went through the same methodology, ran the same analysis, and we built a new report called the B2B Effectiveness Code, which came out towards the back end of last year and is definitely worth a read if you have not already. What we're going to do over the next few minutes is just take you through some of the key findings from that report and what we think they mean in response to the sort of challenge that Mimi laid down at the start.
I think I laid a number of challenges down at the start. One of the things that we found, so the research that James Herman did, I think David mentioned 435 effectiveness cases. It's actually a really spectacularly large data set. And for researchers, often that's the real problem, is to be able to actually compare the same sorts of data. So we found it like a tremendously interesting and scale data set from which to draw some conclusions. So we did find some interesting things. I don't want to walk in front of it, but I'm just going to show you these two things. So B2B and B2C. B2B is the blue, B2C is the red. Very different profiles. So we're looking here at the media channels used, and then I'll just show you the next slide, because actually they're kind of quite similar looking slides. But this is actually the creative strategies used. So the creative strategy is, is it informational and educational? Am I talking to you in the 95% of the space that I think 95% of other people are? Oh, B2B, yes, I'm heavily indexing in that space. Am I talking to you in the emotional space? Am I using music? Have I developed a brand character? In B2B, we don't see an even distribution of tactics, either in terms of creative strategies. So now we're back to media use, so the channels of distribution, email marketing, direct marketing, indexes at like something like 220% email marketing. Even if you shift from this mortal coil, some B2B marketer is still going to be sending you emails on your according to this. So David and I presented some of this work previously, and so what I see, and actually in the Q&A it'd be really interesting to see what other people see, is I see a level of caution in B2B that I don't see in B2C. So let's just look at email marketing, direct marketing, search, online display, PR, video, social media, print, radio, and television. B2C is robustly playing in every single category, both in terms of media use and in terms of creative strategy. We've got information, partnerships, storytelling. B2C starts to under-index at storytelling and continues to under-index across sustainability, humour, UGC, celebrity, brand character, music and emotion. Now, what I think is interesting in this is somebody once, you really date yourself if you talk about film actors, but Warren Beatty, I'm sure everybody knows who Warren Beatty is. So Warren Beatty was, before he met Annette Bening, I used to be, anyway, it doesn't really know why, it doesn't matter why I know this story. But Warren Beatty was a legendary Lothario, and some Hollywood journalist once asked him, said, Warren, how is it that you've slept with so many beautiful women? And Warren Beatty said, and I think we need to remember this, right? He said, whenever I meet a beautiful woman, I ask her to sleep with me. Okay, so Warren Beatty is a reach maximizer. Every time he meets a beautiful woman, he either emails them sends them direct marketing, involves them in search, online display, public relations, online. He's a reach maximizer. And I think that to the point that the creative commitment research proves in a very high cognitive load way, and which I'm obviously making it a little bit simpler, there is a real opportunity to be more like Warren Beatty and to be more of a reach maximizer, both in your channels and also in the creative strategies that you use. So just we'll keep this up for just like one more minute so you can see the distribution. You know, informational and educational, we don't necessarily, it doesn't work when we play that in that space. And actually, there's a zero-sum element to these things as well. If you're over-indexing on creative strategies, then of course you are underestimating and under-indexing on tactics that, like Orlando Wood talks about all the time, music, humour, the way that people look at each other, the kind of things that our brains have had, you know, thousands and thousands and thousands of years to evolve to absorb. We gave a presentation to the whole of LinkedIn just very recently, the B2B Institute team. And I wanted to say, but in the end I didn't. I said that you know, that in the 70,000 years that human beings have been talking, have been, you know, evolved to talk to each other, you know, you could either paint a picture, or you could tell a story, or sing a song, right? The amount of time in human memory that you needed to be able to download and share a SharePoint file is actually really, really small. For the longest time we had sing me a song, paint me a picture, and tell me a story. And actually what the creative strategies used here tells me is that, you know, sing me a song, tell me a story, paint me a picture, annoy me with some little jingle that, you know, you can remember from 20 years ago, and that's how you'll be remembered. So that's how I feel that we should think about this. Be more Warren Beatty, and sing me a song, tell me a story, paint me a picture.
Great. Oh, thank you. So let's go back to creative commitment. So there's three things we talked about: budget, duration, channels. Well, actually, those three things hold in B2B as well. What we found was the relationship between higher levels of creative commitment and higher effectiveness scores held in B2B as well as in B2C. And there's some really good reasons for that. So the B2B Institute's research has separately shown that 95% of buyers in B2B are not buying at the current time. So how do you interest them? Your product ads aren't going to interest them. Ads that are interesting, funny, have a song in it, may actually be a better way of reaching these people. So the longer you keep things in market, the more opportunities you have to reach people, and the more money you put behind it, the more likely you are to generate higher levels of effectiveness. But here's the other thing. We found when we looked at B2C that levels of creative commitment had actually declined over time. Many of you will have heard people like Peter Field talking about the rise of short-termism, more money going to much shorter duration campaigns, a real sort of drift into digital-first advertising. Nothing wrong with digital, of course, but we tend to be equating digital-first campaigns with short-duration campaigns. So we've seen a decline over time. And we've seen this in B2B as well. So it's a warning sign that, and what we hope that this sort of research and the work of the B2B Institute does, is to remind people that it's important. It's important to take creative brand building seriously. Now, the report did one other thing, which was create what we called a B2B effectiveness ladder. We did this with business to consumer back in 2020. But the ladder we developed for B2C campaigns wasn't quite right for B2B. What the ladder is it is a hierarchy of effects. The higher up the ladder you go, the more commercially significant those effects are. So at the very bottom you have things like, we call it response trigger campaigns or lead generator campaigns. And then you get to level 3, which is about closing the sale. Now the point about levels 1 to 3 is they're inherently short term. You've got campaign effects that lead to direct sales. When you start getting into levels 4, 5, and 6, you're getting to levels where you're actually starting to interest people who might not be in the market right now, but as a result, you're generating longer term effects. So can you make your brand famous? Can you move important brand attributes? And at the very top of the ladder, we have what's called strategic asset. I'll explain what I mean by strategic asset in a moment.
What was I think for me like the biggest and most extraordinary takeaway from James's work and from the research is that when you look at the distribution of actual cases, just 5% of all the studies that we evaluated reach the strategic asset level. So just 5% of 435 B2B creative effectiveness cases actually focused on that long-term brand building, which I think speaks massively to the tensions within B2B marketing. But what I would want to advocate for really strongly is that, first off, even in game theory terms, like if only 5% of people are doing something that is proven to be the most effective, the apex of effectiveness, then there's much less competition. Definitely playing in that space gives you a lot more opportunity than, down here it's really ruthless. It's like, response, lead gen, sales close. Those are about harvesting demand that's in the market now, but creating future demand, which, I would argue is a key responsibility for the art and science of marketing, is to create the customers of the future by creating a message that tells them when they're ready to buy that they should already remember you because you already exist in some sort of strange form in their hippocampus, and they've got a retrieval mechanism when there's a cue or a trigger. That 5% is actually where I hope that more B2B marketers start to feel confident about playing. Level 1 is 76%. If you want to hang out with 76 really exciting people and try to be really exciting, it's 76 times harder than if there are only like 5 exciting people. You've got. I'm just saying that the odds can be on your side. So actually, I think David, can you talk through the last slide because you have much more experience?
Yeah. So what does this actually look like in terms of actual campaigns? So we pulled out a campaign that got to level 3. This is a few years old. It's Google Project Rebrief. Great campaign at the time. It was very creative. Basically, Google asked creatives to remake classic ads using digital formats. And the idea was basically to sell Google display advertising, which it did. I think they saw something like a 35% increase in Google display advertising at a time. But it was a total one-off. It happened once, did its job, moved on. Everyone probably got a pay rise, and they went on to next year's campaign.
And equity.
And equity, yes. Compare that with level 6. This is Small Business Saturday. Absolute classic campaign by American Express, where they created their own day to shop small, shop at local businesses. I think this launched in 2010. It's still going now. It was something they were able to revisit during the pandemic to get people to shop small online. So it's a repeatable idea, it's adaptable to new contexts, and as a result, the returns build over time. It's not a one-off. It's something they're always in the market with. It becomes more and more powerful the longer they run it. So a perfect level of what we mean by a strategic assets campaign.
So just final 3 takeaways. Sing me a song, paint me a picture, or whatever the other thing is. Tell me a story. Yes. Use creative brand building. Put a ring on it. It's a long-term relationship, right? If you don't put a ring in it, it's not going to work quite as well. So that's obviously the creative commitment. And I really urge you to look at the ladder, because the ladder actually helps you understand not only where you're able to make an evaluation of where you think your work is. It helps you to predict what would happen if you actually moved up the ladder, and actually to make a case for thinking differently, perhaps within your organisation, about what effectiveness over the long term is, And if you can introduce that as a sort of idea and set of metrics that you can measure, rather than the sort of short-term metrics, hopefully we hope that B2B marketers will be empowered and engaged by all of that. So I think that's us, guys.
I think that's it. And it's just a nice quote to leave you with about strategic assets, but we'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I've got to say that's amazing, because I think you've given people now some real hard evidence and facts to challenge the status quo and the norm with that. In light of the time which we're running, I've got one question here, if I could kindly ask you that, which is, so based on the research which you did with the effectiveness ladder, is it fair to state that the aim should be about developing creative ideas that delivers against all the ladder rungs, or is it that it's something that should be delivering strategic value? How do you interpret the ladder?
It'd be great if everyone was aiming for a level 6 all the time and trying to get up each rung of the ladder, but it doesn't always work like that. I think the point of the ladder is to, as Mimi said at the end there, is to give people the tools to see that actually you could go further. There's more you could do. Is this an idea that could be at one level up or go a bit further? If all you're ever doing, sometimes you have to play at levels 2 or 3 because that's part of the day job. But what if you could push it further? What would it take? What are the conversations you need to have? Whose buy-in do you need? And it just gives people that starting point, that reference point to start having those conversations and really trying to push things further.
Wonderful. I suggest, just in the interest of time, Mimi and David will be around afterwards for Q&A with a drink, so please feel free to hunt them down.
We totally misunderstood the timing thing, because there's a clock here, but we thought that we had to speak until
You've done perfect, you've done amazing. Do not, honestly,
Thank you very much.
no worries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, thank you. Now, I know my position as an account person when it comes to creativity, okay, and it should only go so far before you get out of the creative's backyard, okay? And the final 2 sessions are all focused on that creativity, so I am going to hand the reins over to my business partner and friend, Ruben Webb, Chief Creative Officer at Stein IS. If you could give him a warm welcome. Rubes, take it away, mate.
Hello. Well, if you thought that Mimi and David were giving bad B2B creativity a hard time, I'm its worst nightmare. Okay, so I've been so angry about this for so long. 2009, we wrote a book called 101 Cliches because we were so sick of seeing cliches in B2B marketing. We were so sick of doing them ourselves. So we decided to put them all in a book as a promise to ourselves that we'll never do them again, and hand it out to anyone who wanted it for free to say, you don't have to pay for any of the ideas in this book. Okay? So we were on a real mission, 101 cliches. What was in the book? Cliches like the light bulb. Yeah? The irony is really strong with this. People use this to say, we have good ideas, we have bright ideas, but they can't think of a better way to do it than to produce the bloody light bulb. Very frustrating. So this one's called The Baton. I'm sure you've seen it. The book works like this. It says the cliche, it says what it's supposed to mean, let's work together as a team, and then we've got a little bit of commentary here. So what is that? Let's work together as a team. Yes, let's, on making our communications ideas much less obvious so people notice them. Keep the baton, pass me the sketch pad. Written by a very angry person, wasn't it? There's the handshake. Yeah, probably the unholy mother of all B2B cliches, the partnership. There's the jigsaw. I mean, it just goes on and on. There are 101 of these, which I'm sure you'll recognise in the book. There are copies of the book there for free. Take them away. Okay. So we wrote the book. What did we do next? We thought, well, this message isn't getting through. We're still seeing cliches in B2B marketing. So we made a film. We made the film Cliche Killers. Cliche Killers, the movie. And how's this for personal commitment to a cause? I was dressed up as Hannibal Lecter, There I am eating a chess piece, which is meant to represent strategy. And I'm having that with a nice Chianti. So there we are. How's that for commitment? That took me about 4 hours in makeup to get to be an orc who's smashing a light bulb. So much anger. Right, what else we got? Oh yeah, this one didn't take long in makeup. It was handy that I still had hair at that point, but there's me smashing down the door like the old Shining scene. So I thought it'd be fun just to share with you the trailer for Cliche Killers, the movie.
Go inside the mind of a cliche killer, tormented as a young B2B copywriter. His hopeful ideas twisted into the most horribly abused advertising symbols.
I want a picture of a stop. How about we use a handshake to represent partnership?
Are you ready to see what he's become?
Put it down. Put it down. Oh no! What are you thinking? What?
Don't even want to see it. Can I go now?
Cliche Killers.
Made that movie in partnership with a drum. It's still out there online. Google it, go and see it. All-star cast, including this man here, Tom Stein. Steals the show every time. Okay, so we made the book, we made the film. What next? T-shirts? No. What we wanted to do, we wanted to find out, the anger had subsided a bit, and we were like, are people still out there in B2B marketing doing cliches? So we wanted to do this in a way that was data-driven. Let's go and have a look on the internet and find out if there's cliches still in play in B2B marketing. So we invented the cliche bot, which goes onto the internet and searches for the 101 cliches in that book. Okay, that's what it does. So the cliche bot has been unleashed on the internet, so banner ads better beware. We chose banner ads to do this little study that I'm about to show you because we experimented with websites, but websites are actually full of so much imagery needed on a website that B2B brands often have to rely on stock imagery because it's more cost effective than proprietary imagery every time. It's not really fair to look there because a lot of stock imagery is quite cliched. But when people are putting banner ads out there, that's digital media, banner ads with images, they are putting their brand out, they're putting a message out there. So we thought that was a fair place to look to see if cliches were still in play. So we looked at the top 5 verticals in B2B to make a comparison. Within those top 5 verticals, we looked at the top 5 active B2B brands, so the people that were doing the most advertising in those spaces. So in terms of creative commitment, they are making a commitment, so all the brands you're about to see on the next page, on the next couple of pages, deserve some respect because they're actually doing the advertising. Okay, so culturally, we went for the United States. The cliche bot was getting confused when we tried to do it cross-culturally, different languages, different cultures. People handle creativity different in different places in the world. So we wanted it to be a uniform study. And the United States is where the most money gets spent on banner advertising, I believe. It was certainly a very active market. So we looked at the top 50 banner ads by impression of those top 5 brands in the top 5 verticals. And so what that means is the ones that had been invested in the most. Okay, so the ones that wanted people to see the most. Okay, so we were looking for cliches in those areas. Now, it would be very mean if all we wanted to do was go and see if there were a bunch of cliches in there. This today is about celebrating creativity and offering advice on how to climb that creative effectiveness ladder. So we also fitted the bot with an idea detector, okay? So the criteria there was no idea. That means no relationship between the words and the images in the banner. A basic idea. So a basic idea, God, looks at that then, it's counting down. Thank God, I'm doing really well for time. I panicked for a minute. So basic idea means that there's a relationship between the imagery and the words, so pretty basic stuff, and a conceptual idea, which means that there is an aha moment, that they're asking you to do some thinking so that you get the message, which is how all the best advertising works, okay? So there's three criteria of ideas to be detected, and then craft. So we were looking at craft, which is also very important. Has the idea been crafted from an imagery point of view? Has somebody taken the time and care to make the imagery nice and arrange it properly? And does it use a design system? So is there a graphic design system observable when you put the ads together within each of the brands? Okay? So we've got the bot. It's looking for cliches, ideas, and craft in banner advertising in these sectors. Okay? Energy production, consultancy, pharma, big tech, and financial services. The big brands that you'd expect to see in those spaces are at play. They're advertising, and so I'm sure you recognize many of those brands. So what we're going to do, we're going to have a quick look at what we found in those brands, and then we're going to look at a table that ranks them in terms of creativity. So what I'd like you to do is make a guess now which sector you think, which vertical you think will be the one that comes out as the most creative. Just want you to make a mental note of that. And then I want you to make a mental note of the one you think will be the least creative. If you've got a really good memory, rank them in order 1 being the most, all the way through to 5 being the least. And if you predict the same thing that the cliche bot came back with, you get a prize. Okay? So you've got to be honest there. I'll ask you when the time comes. Okay. So let's go and take a look. First, we'll look at energy production. It's not great. It's not great. There's not a lot of ideas detected. There's not a lot of craft detected. The only silver lining here is there wasn't any cliches found, which is why the bot's very disappointed. It wants to catch some cliches, but there were none there. So that was one positive. Okay. Consultancy. So consultancy was a bit better. There was more ideas detected, 56 out of 250. It's okay. Craft, a better story in the craft, 94 and 22 advanced. But this was the place where the most cliches were found, funny enough. Consultancy was where, so 13 out of 250 is not bad, but it was the most out of any of them. And I've asked why that is. I'm like, well, why consultancy? And the answer I've arrived at is that no one knows what consultancy looks like. It's a very hard thing to articulate. You know, what is it? When you think about energy production, you immediately see things in your head. And those are the things you see in banner advertising, you know, turbines and energy production plants. You may think they're cliches in themselves, but they're not in the book. But so these, in consultancy, you can't see anything, so you have to reach for an analogy. We want to say this thing. If we're going to show an image, it has to be analogous, and so that's where cliches arrive. You know, well, it's all about partnerships. So what should we show? There were a lot of light bulbs in there as well, by the way. Okay, so that was consultancy. Pharma. Pharma, so-so, 61 in the ideas detective. Craft, pretty average. One cliche found. Financial services. Oh, did I skip one? Yes, I did, yeah. So big tech was a really positive story. Big tech, there were a lot of basic ideas detected, and there was a lot of craft detected. So whatever was going on in big tech, it was really positive. And we'll come and take a look at that in a moment. Financial services, not bad in craft, but funny enough, in the ideas, they were the only vertical that had conceptual advertising detected. Okay, 36. So it was like, wow, what's going on here? And actually, what was going on there was down to one brand in particular in that space. I wonder if you can guess which brand it is. I will reveal that, but have a think. Okay, so Let's look at the table of creativity. So this is how it was judged. You got 1 point for a basic idea or craft, you got 2 points for something advanced, and you got -1 point for a cliche. So who had big tech at the top and energy production at the bottom? Anybody? No? Oh, interesting, interesting. So in that case, nobody got the order right at all then, did they? Nobody gets the prize. Oh, what a shame. It was a cliche book, by the way. So, you know, and there's a load of them up for free over there. So you got a free, whatever. So that was the order. So big tech and energy production at the bottom. Again, I'm just speculating really as to why that is. But when you look at the brands in the big tech space, looking at Adobe, AWS, Cisco, you're looking at Salesforce, and I think the market for those brands, every business on earth can be their customer. So they're more conscious that their brand needs to expand to more people. And I think it's just more creatively competitive, that they're fighting for more people's attention. And so I just think it's a more mature place to be creatively than energy production, where the ecosystem is very small. You know, there's not that many people you need to market to, and I think business is done in that industry a lot of person to person and on reputation and experience in the field. Maybe it's a bit like, you know, shooting fish in an oil barrel down there for business to get done. So they're just not trying that hard because they don't have to. Maybe, I don't know. Okay, so let's go and have a look now then. Let's celebrate some of the good things that the cliche block came back with. So Adobe, Salesforce and State Street are the three brands that in that little study were performing the best. They were the most creative in terms of the criteria that we had. So Adobe were very hot on imagery craft, and they had a good design, good simple design system in place. There was proprietary imagery that was treated well, original photography. That makes sense. Adobe sell software that helps people create crafted images, and they sell software that helps people create design systems. So it behooves them to do that in their own marketing, and it's great. You know, so it comes across, and you think, yep, they are living the dream that they sell. So, and banner advertising, you know, isn't a place that's easy to do really creative things, and so kudos to them. State Street was the one I talked about in terms of the conceptual advertising. That was the financial services brand that tipped the scales for financial services, and they are every banner ad that the bot came back with, they were trying to do something creative. You know, they were trying to put a creative energy into it that gave you a little aha moment. So they had this get in and out thing going on, where there was lots of examples of people getting in and out of a situation, and then this one over here, they had, you know, you saw this as an animated little banner where you saw the car, you thought it was big, you saw the driver, you thought he was in a big car, and then it revealed this, you know, don't get left with less. So it's telling a little story. You know, they were telling little stories in their advertising, and they seem to have made a real commitment to doing that. So I wonder whether it's a cultural thing that's State Street wide. And we have Sarah here from State Street, and I'll be asking her directly if that's the case. But yeah, definitely a creatively mature brand that was doing cool stuff. So Salesforce. Now Salesforce were the other tech brand that were scoring high on the craft. So great imagery, nice design system. Really feel good, good use of colour. They really cared about their banner advertising. And there was this little character that kept popping up in there. which you probably recognise. He's called Astro. He's called Astronomical. And they didn't score in the conceptual. They didn't get any hits on concepts, but the bot couldn't recognise that this was a concept when you take a look at the bigger picture. So what I love about what Salesforce are doing is that they have a character-based universe that is based on the idea that we will make tech a more friendly experience. So they've got little characters that represent different areas of tech. So for instance, they got Cody the bear, and he speaks to developers. You know, he speaks their language to make tech friendly to them, to that community. And this whole thing about having characters to make tech more friendly, that whole idea started with the little character called Sassy. He's like he had the logo on that was no software, but he had a lot of fun. He went out there and he did stuff. Now, this for me, I think this is where creativity has become an asset for Salesforce. I think they've committed to it, and it's something that I think people like. When you look into it, I think the internal audience like it, the external audience seem to like it, and it's very useful. It's very useful to the marketers at Salesforce. I can see every time they're like, oh, right, okay, we've got an ebook to give away, what should we do? Well, we're going to have Astronomical holding the ebook, presenting it to people. You know, this idea answers marketing questions as they arise. And I think that is a really good strategic marketing asset to have. And it's what we would call a big, long idea. So an idea that's big enough to speak to all the audiences for everybody's different needs, and long enough to work along the buyer journey through every type of content. And it certainly has lasted the test of time. So they've really committed to it. And I think it's a big, long idea that's become an asset for their brand. So if I was going to call out one brand of climbing the creative effectiveness ladder, I think it's Salesforce. And I'd love to speak to Mimi about that as well afterwards. Okay, so what else are we doing? That's it. There we go. There you go. That's the conclusions. So, right. So, how are we doing for time here? We okay? We okay? Okay, so Q&A then. We can do a bit of Q&A, can't we? I don't have to make up too much time here. So, yeah, I'm ready to take questions on any of that. Joel.
Hi, Ruben. Lovely presentation. I like the fact you've kept that cliches campaign and reinvented that for a new era. I was a slightly facetious question, but it's going to give you an opportunity to riff on it, I hope, which is that we heard from Can Lions earlier on that partnership is a big deal now, and we saw actually LinkedIn say that actually B2B is quite good at partnership. It's good to know they're good at something. Are you now worried as creative director you're going to have to do loads of ads with handshakes in them again?
Yeah, I'm absolutely terrified about that. No, but I do like that thought though, and I like the fact that there are creative partnerships emerging, and I think that's one thing that agencies. I wonder, you have. There's a great partnership between agency and client, but I wonder whether agencies are going to have to start helping brands to partner as well. That was my overriding thought when I saw that, and I'm starting to think, do we do that enough? Do we actually take one? And funnily enough, I've been having a few conversations along those lines with clients, and I think that can't be a coincidence. So thanks for the facetious question. Are there any serious questions? Please. Or not.
Hello.
So the cliches, do you have any sort of idea of whether actually in the end the cliches kind of work better than the non-cliches? That might be the temptation for people that sort of ended up using them.
It's a good question, because actually a cliche, in this sense, it does qualify as an idea. So rather than absolutely nothing, which is what you do find a lot, no relationship between image, so just sort of quite lazy thinking in terms of like an image that's very basic, and then just a statement about what the brand wants to tell you. Maybe a cliche would be more effective. But that's a really interesting question that I have no data to work with to tell you about the effectiveness of cliches. I think, you know, the whole point of the book was we just thought they're just so obvious, you know, they're just such obvious things that when, you know, I've had experiences early in my career when I've been asked specifically to do a cliche and put aside all these ideas we'd had, you know, and I think, if anything, it's trying to stand up for the B2B creative community and say, stop, don't do this. Don't let people do this to you. You know, and that's really what this idea is about in terms of the cliches. But it's an interesting question. No idea or a cliched idea, which is more effective, could be an interesting study. Okay.
Yeah.
Have we got time for one more? Yeah.
When you work with clients who, you know, have a long history of cliches, and they want to start moving out of that, but it would be a dramatic shift, and especially from the marketing perspective, you would get pushback from, you know, other parts of it. How do you recommend starting to make that shift and you know, get them on their way, because you know, it's a challenge to get out of that. I don't know if you've experienced it.
Well, many times, and it's a great question, and I think it's a question that aligns with the creative effectiveness ladder. You know, there's a lot of B2B brands that are starting at the bottom of that ladder, and I think I'm really grateful for that, the presence of that ladder now and that study, because actually it gives everybody something to point at. And so what I would be 100% recommending from this day forward is for the conversation, you walk in with that ladder and you say, and we've done this is kind of the variations of, but this is an actually live example of how to use what you've seen today. Because what I found with a lot of B2B brands is the marketing teams want to do this. You know, they don't want to be in a creative, ineffective cycle. They want to build a brand, but they get resistance outside in the organization, and usually that's through misunderstanding of the power of marketing itself. And I think, and certainly a misunderstanding of the power of creativity and what that can do to enhance marketing and growth. So I would actually, from this day forward, start that conversation by going, here's the ladder. Where are we on it? We've got to climb it. Take this outside of your marketing peers and take it to your business peers as well throughout the organization, because I think this shows that creativity can lead to growth. So there's a piece of advice there. Okay, I think I'm going to invite my next panel to join us. So please, everybody, welcome Sarah, Simon, and Isla. I'm sorry, I've left my book there. It's yours.
Good catch.
Right, okay. So, welcome everybody to our next session, which is called the Evolving CMO CCO Partnership. Essentially, what do you want from me? Now, you've heard a lot from me, and I think you get the gist of where I'm at. You know, essentially, I think chief creative officers the world over want to do great work that has an effect on the business. So to work with, create something like Salesforce have created, to create a culture like I think that State Street have created, something that's meaningful to the business creatively. And I think that's a passion, everybody wants that, that's an ambition that the creative community always want to be a part of. And so I would love to ask you how you would like help in achieving that goal and what your goals are. So, I'm going to start with you, Sarah.
Of course.
So, I would like to ask, we've just seen how State Street Global Advisors seems to have a really positive and ambitious attitude towards creative ideas. So, can you tell us, is it a cultural State Street-wide truth? this is something I wonder, did Fearless Girl ignite that? That fantastic campaign, did that like turn the dial towards a new creative culture? And if you are, you know, if you do have this creative culture and you're trying to achieve great things to move up that effectiveness ladder, what do you need from a creative partnership to help that?
Okay, thank you. So I think there are lots of things to unpack there. Fearless Girls certainly shook us a little bit out of our inherent conservatism a little bit, and it was the first out of category thing that we'd ever really done that had been so successful. So definitely it made a case for challenging ourselves and our perceptions of what was achievable as a brand. But there's always this flip side to that, and sometimes when you have a really successful campaign, it almost makes you want to double down and lock in the gains. It almost a sense of, right, we've done it now, so let's not rock the boat. That really worked for us, let's not do something new and different and move again, because that's our thing now. So Fearless Girl was definitely a catalyst, but the conversation about creativity continues non-stop. That dialogue tends to focus around 3 questions for us, all of which our agency partners can help us with, but I think the third is probably the most important. The first one is really about making the case for change. So why do something different? Cliches are cliches for a reason. People recognise them. I couldn't help but flick through your book to see if my favourites were in there. You actually had 2 of them. One was the dynamic team and the glasses. Mine is a combination. When the glasses wearer needs to take their glasses off to have a thought and put them back on when they've had one. I can't bear it, but we see it all the time. 2 that aren't in there, which are also personal bugbears of mine, are the boat. We're going on a journey, everyone. We need our boat. And the bridge is also our destination. Here we are, and this is our journey as well. So when we tend to talk to our internal stakeholders and we talk about being creative, those are the reference points for them about what being creative means. And I think that it's important to encourage them to co-create with us, to bring them along the way. But equally, there's that sense that because marketing is something that everyone touches and feels every day, that they feel like, I know what an ad looks like. I can do ads. I've got a boat for you. Let's do boats. So it's hard to keep the conversation going on that way. So giving the case for change, showing how we're so undifferentiated as an industry. If we go with a boat, if we go with the glasses, we're going to look the same as everybody else. So let's try something different and take a risk that we feel is warranted. You can absolutely help us with that. The second question we get is, okay, so we like the idea, but is it going to make us money? Because you're into marketing, but I'm into making money. I'm a bank. So how can you justify the money you're asking for? And to this day, marketing budgets, however small, are still eye-popping for most organisations. There's still a bit of naivety, perhaps, in terms of what it takes to really move the dial. So the next question we get is, okay, if we do this, what can we expect in terms of ROI? How can you prove that similar strategies like this in the past have really delivered for other clients, other customers? And I was encouraged to see the quantity of graphs up here today, because my stakeholders speak in numbers, they don't speak in images. So if I can't give them very numeric, very hard data as to why strategies like this have worked in the past, I'm always going to be on the back foot in my conversations. The last one, which I think is trickiest, is about cultural fit. So some of the most beautiful creative ideas I've ever seen, we haven't used. And we haven't used them because they were chosen not to use them because they were bad ideas, but because for the culture of the organisation we're in, we know our DNA better than anyone. And they're just not a good fit for the authenticity of the brand. I was encouraged by the conversation at the top of the session around B2B and B2C. Really, that distinction doesn't really exist anymore. And why that matters to me is that all of our campaigns are judged in a court of public opinion. And they don't differentiate between whether it's a B2C or a B2B campaign. But if our brand comes across as inauthentic, that will get picked apart in the court of public opinion instantly. So we need to know that the creative really does fit with our brand. And the best partners that I've worked with, and again, this conversation about long-term relationships, I was pleased that Mimi stood away from Bora BT at the end. We definitely find that those organisations that really understand our corporate culture are the ones we work best with long-term, because they understand that while this campaign looks brilliant for that organisation, it's never going to work. And to your point, the marketing teams will always try and push the needle, but we also would love to have our creative partners come and just meet our lifers, come and meet our investment people, come and meet the people that typical partners never ever get to meet. You get to meet the marketing people, but we are out there versus the corporate culture of the organisation. So to really understand the people who've worked in our business for 15, 20 years and what matters to them will tell you so much about our business and what will work for us. So in short, is there a culture of creativity? Absolutely. but it's by no means baked in, and it's a dialogue that is definitely not a one and done. It's an ongoing conversation.
Yeah, some really interesting thoughts, and contextuality, I think, is a really it's an essential part of B2B. That if you don't get that right, you don't build trust. So if you can't have a great idea that's got the context right, then it will instantly alienate people in that organisation. That's a real challenge. To find something, to Simon's point earlier, that's simple but contextual to what can be and often is a complex brand environment. So absolutely. Very interesting. Simon, I'm going to come to you next. So IBM is famous for one of the most iconic and effective B2B ideas of all time, which was Smarter Planet. So that was a really big, long idea. It was fantastic. And I wonder, do you have, as a brand, ambitions for the next era-defining idea with IBM? I notice there's something new in the market now. Perhaps you're going to touch on that. I know this is a long question, but how do you create a culture that unites around an idea like that, Smarter Planet, and what do you need from creatives to make that culture happen?
Sure. So look, a number of questions there as well that you've embedded in there. I think it starts with the fact, if you go back...
We were recognised for our effectiveness from big institutions like WARC and the Marketing Society.
About products. What Smarter Planet did for the first time from IBM's point of view is put an enduring idea on the table. It started to say that we're not what we sell, but we're actually what we deliver. And it started to turn around and say that we may have started off selling and working with meat cutters and time recording systems, but actually now we talk about cloud and quantum computing and AI, and we move forward. So we need an idea that would be enduring, that would encapsulate that. And people got behind this idea of make the world smart, this Smarter Planet side of things. So it gave us that platform, and the important thing is a platform which everybody could be creative around, that they could bring it into their discussions. So I was listening to discussions earlier, and we were talking about simplicity and put a ring on it. Two things that I thought, hang on, this fits in. So how do you make it simple, and how do you get that longevity? How do you have something that you can build on? And it is the platform that makes a difference. So we need to think about that brand purpose and that enduring idea. And as you said, we've launched recently a new focus on it to really get that clarity around what IBM stands for. And the purpose is all about being the catalyst that makes the world better, makes it work better. It's not about IBM doing everything, but it's actually about bringing people together, bringing that convening. So this new era that we've brought out, hopefully you've seen some of this. I was walking through Waterloo and saw it coming up this morning, but it's all about let's create. And let's create is this open invitation for people to come together, for technology and people to come together to work on some of those challenges that we will face, those largest challenges in the world, in our businesses and the environment in which we live. And I think it comes from this thought that with the world being so complex, it's not one company or one technology, and it's not technology alone which is going to fix it. So we need to create this environment in which people actually come together. And the thing that makes this different to some of the other advertising that we've done when we've talked about products is we're back to a platform again, so that we can talk about this from the creativity side of things and the way people are creative. We can talk about the ideas that we, our clients and our partners, bring out to actually solve some of these problems. And we can tell stories around it in terms of the way it lasts over time. So our plan is that this is the next platform that enables us to deliver, if you like, it's the replacement for Smarter Planet as we think about that creativity. You asked about how we bring it to life, how we out there and do it. So in the case of IBM, it's brought to life in a large way amongst the IBMers, amongst the staff itself. So we needed to enable people with this platform, we needed to inspire them, and we also needed to engage around it, to bring it to life in their own way. Think about how they create and how they go out there and tell stories once they work with clients and partners to bring these things to life. So the IBMers is the way to actually bring it to life. Yes, there's digital out of home, yes, there's other media that it's delivered on, but actually the IBMers that make this really special because they're going to bring it to life in terms of the technology. What do we need from agencies? What do we need from the partners we're working with? It is that platform thought. it is about not thinking about this just as a single creative idea, not coming up with a great vision and a great graphic alone, but thinking about how they package that into something that becomes a platform which is applicable across our business. We have a very complex business, we work in a very complex market. So how do we enable a platform that everybody can participate in? And then how do we go out and make sure that our agencies, that the ecosystem, the partners we're working with, that the IBMers that are out there can also come together and feel inspired by it. So there's a number of things that sit underneath there, but it starts with that enduring idea. Do we have something that turns around and says it's not defined by what we sell today or what we offer today, it's defined by enduring idea. And then the proof points are the stories and the way we deliver it out there in the world today. So probably an answer to the question, but I think it's about that next enduring idea.
No, it's not long answer. I'm sure we could hear a lot more. And I would so Let's Create to me looks like a wonderful platform to work with, because it's. Do you think behind that thought is it setting a challenge for marketing and agencies to do something, create? Because it's a really powerful thing to say. And you know, it does lay down the gauntlet of creative challenge. It says, come on then, we've got to do, so the campaigns, I'm really interested to see what emerges, because it sounds like something that would be very exciting to work with. And culturally, I feel IBM must have done this on purpose.
It's very, we've positioned it very much as we would call it an open invitation. Open invitation. It's
perfect.
Like, come create, come make it real. And you'll see it rolled out in various stages. So right now, the first stage, and it only launched literally the other week, is all about capabilities. So you'll see us talking about capabilities. And as we go through this, you'll see these stories come to life as we bring to the world how these capabilities do enable us to create. But as I say, it's not about IBM creating on our own. It's very much about that let's create, let's bring people together, let's convene this dialogue, let's be the catalyst in terms of making and helping the world to work better. That's what the story's all about. So lots more to come, lots of examples to be out there, and it's going to grow over time. But keep your eyes open for it. It's I've seen it all over London on digital boards coming up, and it was great to see it in Waterloo today on the big boards as well.
Exciting stuff. Isla, let me bring you into the conversation. So, Isla, I know that you've recently taken the CMO role at UBS Asset Management. So what I'd like to ask you is, do you have ambitions to take the brand and climb the creative effectiveness ladder? And how do you do that in an industry that's historically risk averse? And what do you need from creative partnerships to make it happen?
Thanks, Ruben. So, yes, I am new in role. Been about 10 weeks into my new role at UBS Asset Management. And obviously, I'm kind of, you know, in the reality of a new CMO. So, as you know, every business is unique, has its own unique set of opportunities and challenges. And, you know, for UBS Asset Management is part of UBS Group. So, you know, it really is at the moment at the start of its journey in terms of realising its potential. At the moment, you know, I've been looking at really pulling in all the data sets, you know, the things that I need to understand the company's DNA, to understand where it sits in the group, to understand its potential. And, you know, the truth is, as a business, it has been really sitting at that bottom rung of the ladder. It's actually a very successful business, but most of its marketing has been focusing on its very, very large product shelf. And when I've started to look at the client insight and try and start to gather that and think about what that's telling me, you know, the truth is that clients don't really know us for anything in particular. So we're actually, you know, a top 13 global brand on the asset management stage, but actually that has been driven through our scale and our market coverage. So a great opportunity, of course, to be in that position, to be able to start to think about where could I take UBS Asset Management in terms of ideas, and, you know, where could, you know, we be more successful, but also, you know, create more success for UBS Group. You know, and so some of the things that are on my mind are, you know, how do we create a stronger narrative for UBS Asset Management to ladder up to the group to make those patterns more meaningful and for them to sit better together. So, you know, I guess as a new CMO too, it's important to think about what are the things that people expect from you. So, you know, I think it's fair to say that they expect you to start to move the needle for the organisation, and that creates its own pressure. You're also starting to try and work out where is the creative potential in here? What kind of capability do you have? Where can I unlock that creative potential? So, you know, where am I looking for inspiration to really think about where we can go, you know, on the journey? Well, the asset management industry is, you know, at a very interesting point, and you know, it's become increasingly difficult, I think, I guess create differentiation in market. You know, it's very commoditized. Everyone's going after the same kind of thing. You know, sustainability and ESG has been a big theme for the industry. You know, we're seeing a lot of consolidation in the industry, and you know, there are 2 or 3 kind of really big themes, you know, that everyone seems to be going after, where they see, you know, future revenue opportunities. And that's the reality of the business. But what's also starting to happen, and what's shifting a little bit, is that because of that environment and that very competitive environment and that difficulty to get differentiation, I think there is a growing realisation that creativity has its own alpha. And that's an interesting concept in itself, because alpha in the asset management industry, in an investment management industry, has always been about performance. How do you deliver that additional performance on top of the benchmark? And that's really what clients have been looking for. But alpha is starting to be created by some firms in the asset management industry that's non-financial alpha. And I think you're seeing that, you know, with firms that have really thought about how to, you know, position their sustainability credentials, start to drive a different conversation about value add, you know, firms who are looking to co-create with clients. So there is a lot of potential there. And I see opportunities then for this alpha creation to start to manifest itself in unique ways across the customer journey. So product was always the orientation of asset managers. Marketing teams and asset management businesses still do have that challenge. How do you get the rest of the business, as you said, to lift away from this constant obsession with selling products and think about how you add value to the overall client experience? So that's one area I'm looking at, how to, you know, think about where can I get inspiration from what's going on. A couple of other things I would mention. You know, at the moment, you know, in the market, you've got to really think about, you know, how your clients are feeling. So you know, we have clients, you know, who are feeling like us today. You know, we're coming out of a situation of plague, and we've now moved into a situation where there's a war. And clients are feeling discombobulated. We're feeling discombobulated. We're feeling anxious. We're feeling sometimes empty. So creating meaningful connection with customers really takes a lot of thought. So one of the things I'm thinking about is how to create that meaningful connection, you know, with our clients, and is that the route that I want to start to take UBS Asset Management in? In regard to that, you know, sometimes you've just got to actually really start with the problem, and businesses get a little obsessed about thinking about their own problems, but actually there's loads of problems that are facing investors and clients out in the market. There's sometimes disconnects between what the retail customer is looking for and then the roles that asset management you know, firms or consultants or the pension fund holders and the people that are making decisions about those that affect those retail customers are making. We know that there's a big problem, you know, about women not investing, even professional women who, you know, should know, you know, that this is going to make a fundamental difference to their outcomes. We know there's a disconnect between retail customer expectations and, you know, the pension fund holders and how they're looking at ESG. You know, in the States, you've got big political issues between retail customers looking to have sustainable solutions, and in some, you know, parts of the market, it's actually illegal for those pension fund you know, trustees to be actually making decisions that could impact industries, you know, in Texas and some of those other markets. So, you know, I guess the way I'm looking at it at the moment is really to just, you know, consider the whole art of the possible. You know, moving away may mean taking a new territory and starting to think about how that single idea could manifest in a different way that's moving the industry on from where it is today. you know, it's early days for me, and I'm just really starting on that journey with UBS Asset Management. I guess to answer your question about what do I need from the creative partnership, I mean, you know, for me, you know, for an organisation like UBS Asset Management at the start of this journey, it's to help me start to reframe the opportunity set, to start to help the organisation realise how much unrealised potential there is from just sitting at the bottom of the ladder, and how we could actually, you know, really lift the business and change the minds of our clients by taking a different approach. I think it's also about trust, Ruben. So, you know, for somebody, you know, in my position, you know, finding a partner who can work with us in the long term for that journey, who can really get to under the skin of the DNA of the business, really think about how to challenge us and move us, you know, to that next phase of thinking, but also understand that we're on that journey of change is really, really critical. So, you know, I'm very much looking forward to actually starting to work with creative partners. I'm excited about the opportunity, but I know there's lots of challenges ahead. So that's where I'm sitting today, and I hope that gave a bit of a flavour of, you know, where we could potentially go and the way I'm looking at it.
Absolutely fascinating. And a lot of what you've just said there is, you know, it's making me feel emotional. and I wonder, because there's so many subjects that you raise there, in your area of expertise that are really emotional topics and subjects, and I wonder whether you think, any of the panel think that there is room for more emotional creative marketing that's not frivolous, not having fun, but is getting some of those very serious messages across about asset management in the current context. And, you know, so for one example, women not investing enough, you know, that's incredibly emotional territory. What do you think about that?
I laughed because I'm one of them. I put some money in my pension, that's all I've got. So, and I work
forms to fill in after.
I know.
I can see buying signals here.
Buying signals. So, absolutely, and I think it's about your credibility to offer that kind of advice and connect in that emotional way. I think we talked about representation earlier. We are nowhere near as an industry able to start telling people how to do that better. You know, we have to educate ourselves and fill our own pipeline before we tell other people how to operate. But on women not investing, one of the reasons I always get very defensive about the city, I've worked there for 20 years, is the women who work there are almost always the wage earners for their entire family. They are the livelihood. And that is from, not just talking about the MDs, we're talking about everyone who's working on the front desk, all the EAs. They are the breadwinners for their family. And when you think about the ecosystem of even our industry, which tends to be seen as kind of quite high end, that's from the top to the bottom, and women are a huge part of providing now for their families in a way that they weren't necessarily, perhaps, 50 years ago. It's an amazing progress, but there's so much more to be done in terms of, you know, how are we going to afford our retirement? How are we going to be able to send our kids to university if that's our aspiration? How are we going to be able to make sure that, you know, our grandparents can have a pension when they get old? So I think when we can connect on a credible level and we have genuine expertise and we can then match that with the emotional relevancy of why this really matters, financial security is a huge thing for everyone, and it's something that often gets downplayed.
I think the emotional aspect is critical right now. It's become very noisy out there. I think there's so many things pulling on our time that if you can get your animation there in terms of the excitement, because it was personally there,
yes.
Demonstrates that. But I think what's critical is as we go into those emotional discussions and tell those stories, that we remain authentic. And I think it's when we move away from that, we tell a story, tell a story that prompts it, and then we start actually moving away and we get the impact we see. So emotion, yes, but not cosmetic emotion. It needs to be deep emotion that cuts, that's real. Lots of people have jumped on the bandwagon, for instance, around healthcare over the last couple of years. And I think where there are real stories that bite, absolutely, they tell the story and they buy in. But I think we need to be very careful of emotion washing or whatever you want to call it, because I think then you lose credibility and it has the opposite effect. So I think just careful on that side of things. But yes, it needs to be in there.
Last comment, Isla, before I open it up for questions?
Yeah, I mean, I think you know, sometimes drawing on the energy that you have around something is what you need to do to spur you. And I think, you know, listening to you guys talking, I kind of realised there's a kind of bit of an anger in me about, you know, the fact that we haven't, you know, done more as an organisation. And I did feel quite inspired by some of the ideas that I saw and things that I heard earlier around these brilliant kind of creative executions, you know, that are really getting to the core of the problem. You know, one possibility I think for the asset management industry and financial services is they don't partner together around some of these big important themes. And I think, you know, as marketers, it might be time that we start to be more challenging around that and challenging the industry to think about how partnership could start to address some of the biggest issues in a different way. Because while we're trying to pick each other off to get to the top of that revenue tree and obviously to drive those results, I think some important opportunities are being missed to do important things that would help, you know, people have better outcomes in their lives. So that's my emotion coming out about it. And, you know, I think it is time for a change around that and to see some different behaviours.
And I think it's not just about driving money either. I think areas of talent acquisition right now where we're seeing challenges in the industry in many roles, how do we inspire people? How do we tell those emotional stories so that people feel compelled to come into maybe new opportunities? Maybe it's part-time workers coming back into the office to do jobs that they looked at before and thought they weren't accessible to them. We have to go and tell those stories as well, not just generating the revenue side of things. We've got to do both, I think, in the current world.
I agree, because I think that's part of brand building in the modern era. I'm going to open this up for questions now. That's been fascinating. I knew it would run long. We've got a couple of minutes for questions in the room. Does anybody have a question?
May I?
Please, Tom.
First of all, thank you. That was incredibly insightful, and I appreciate all the perspectives. But I wanted to ask you, Simon, about the IBM campaign that's launching. And one of the things that strikes me about it is that, and why it may prove to be very successful, is it feels like it's as much for internal stakeholders as it is for external stakeholders, and the one then connects to the other. And I thought maybe you could just expand on that or agree if that isn't in fact the case.
Sure. So the short answer is yes. So it does take into account all stakeholders. I mean, I think the word that I keep using is building pride. So pride in the organisation. IBM is a very complex organisation. Last year we spun off our managed services business into a separate company, Kyndryl, and we needed to make sure that we went out to radically restate what IBM stands for. And part of that is about restating it to our teams, to our employees. It's interesting that IBM is one of the companies that I've worked in where we refer to as IBMers. We have this connection with the company. And I think having that clarity and having that pride is really important, and enabling the IBMers to adopt and embrace it, to tell their stories. So absolutely right, that internal audience is really important in terms of telling it. And it's not only the internal audience within IBM, but it's the roots as we go out to talk to our clients. So how does the ecosystem actually work with it? How do our agencies take it on board? How do the selling partners take it on board? And then how do we actually go and tell those client stories? So it is right the way across, and that's why I keep referring to it as a platform, and the platform enables us to deliver and tell that enduring idea. It's not about a product or an individual solution. It is about this enduring idea, and that's really important. It's a great question.
Another question here in the room.
Thank you. So it's wonderful to hear the emotion and the connection that you have to the potential that your company's offering can deliver to consumers. And I'd love to know from each of you, if it's possible, like what's the biggest thing that's getting in the way today of doing the creative and emotive work that you want to do?
Will I go?
Yeah, go for it.
I think fear of the unknown for me really is how I would articulate it. I mean, as an asset management and financial services, it's just been so long focused on certain things that making that kind of leap of faith for me to, pursue avenues, that really open up those opportunities is the thing. And I think as a CMO, you know, part of my job, I think 100% is to start to try and break down those fear barriers. And, you know, at the end of the day, we all know that, you know, if you don't try things, you're just going to stay, you know, where you are today. So, yeah, I mean, there's lots of ways that I think that can manifest. There's lots of inherent behaviours, but, you know, shifting that dynamic is where I think we'll see the most opportunity going ahead.
I'd say that the thing that is most stopping us is also the biggest opportunity, which is about getting a constant understanding and a consistent delivery of what that brand platform stands for. That's the opportunity that's there, but in a company with 250,000 people, you've got to embrace that and get around it. So it is about that enablement, it's about the inspiration, it's about taking the complex and making it simple. So it's both something in the way, but it's also the opportunity as well.
Sarah, would you like to have a last word on this?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's twofold for us. I think that we're the fear element is around value signalling and this is an emotive time in the world and serious stories have impact, but we have to be credible telling them, and there's a big concern about being caught out for, oh my goodness, they say they do this, but actually look at their record in that, and there being a disconnect. So there's that worry. You talked earlier about our culture around creativity, and we definitely realised when we did things like Fearless Girl, we've been looking to do something around climate, and we've struggled to finish on an idea that we're comfortable with. And the reason is we realised one of our guardrails was that we want to be sending messages that are ultimately forward-looking, that are positive, that are messages of hope. And I think in the current environment it's really difficult to think about something like, say, on climate. How do you deliver that in a way that gives a message of hope? You'd have seen thousands of creatives recently, they've got the children on the rubbish dump. They just make your heart break. And we realised for us, what we loved about Fearless Girl was the positivity. It was the hope that the future can change and that humanity is fundamentally good. I think at the moment we're struggling to find that idea that allows us to give that hopeful message that's forward-looking and optimistic against a backdrop that fundamentally is the opposite.
Fantastic. I'm going to have to bring this to a close, I'm afraid, and invite Craig Duxbury back. Thank you very much to our panel. Big round of applause.
I think final 1 minute, I think it's probably the hardest thing to unpack given everything that's kind of come out today, but I just wanted to try and distill a few sound bites which definitely struck a chord with myself from a context of B2B. I think Isla at the end, fantastic. I think we scarcely find ourselves in a position in B2B where we have product differentiation, and creativity is such a underplayed utilisation and asset to actually address that. And that asset now needs unleashing as of today when you leave. I think that's a fundamental thing. Done with the social and emotional levers that need to be pulled with this, which Mimi kindly went through earlier. I think it's going beyond product delusion, but it struck really home then about the need for that to be real and authentic and not just to go after that commercial gain, which we can do too much within the organisations. I think that was mega and really strong coming through. The need for less caution, but more meaningful customer connections. I think that was a really strong pull through from what we've heard. And I think ultimately it's where the opportunity is. If only 5% of B2B brands are living there, why are we playing in the sea of sameness where the other 70% are living? It's crazy when you think about it. I think we've heard a lot about the need for creative commitment. Let's please make that pledge as B2B people to simplify things and not get caught up in our own world where we think everything's mega complex and it's harder here than it has to be. Think about the customers and the impact that has. So let's pledge to simplify positionings and messagings and go-to-markets with that. Perhaps we might make our own lives a little bit easier at the same time of doing it. I think there's a massive opportunity to embrace representation when you think about B2B. It's all to do with complex buying groups. The buying groups are getting larger, more complex. There's plenty of representation which we can tap into there as well. Make the case for change. Sarah, Craig, you brought this through. Go and make that case for change within your organisations. Unfortunately, we'll never get out of it in B2B where creativity can live in isolation from numbers, return on investment. Go and use the report, download the effectiveness report, go get your heads into the code. If you've not done already, start to take that into the boardroom to justify those decisions with it. And I think as well as an agency, a massive learning to also not get caught into the short game, but to play the longer game with our clients. and help them with those corporate cultures and those brand cultures, and to go beyond just the brief and doing that, but really get empathetic towards what is taking place within our clients. I think that was a massive one. 2 final thoughts. Brand is future demand. I think that's really strong, that we have to think about that as B2B marketers. The final one, before I say thank you, is go and put a ring on it. All right. Thank you very much to everyone in the room, virtually. Thank you very much. And for those who are here, apologies for saying this to people who are virtual, but the bar is now open. Thank you.